Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. It's such a privilege to be here after a week, 10 days of being even more privileged because the team and I could really spend time with Carrie Mae Weems' work on our own, very privately, very close up, and we all feel blessed. The evidence of things not seen is the subtitle, the title of this exhibition, an exhibition that actually Carrie Mae Weems started preparing with colleagues from Barcelona, from the Fundación MAPFRE, from Colectania and MACBA. The conversation was joined by colleagues from Stuttgart, actually, Hans Christ and Iris Dressler from the Württembergischer Kunstverein. And the conversation was joined by us, Kunstmuseum Basel, and the Barbican Center in London. And so here we are. As you can see, it's quite a show. It takes place on 3 floors of our building, and it is really also a conclusion moment it's a European tour in a way. And I'm really happy also to mention actually that Carrie, when she got here 10 days ago, she just received the super prestigious Hasselblad Award in Gothenburg, Sweden. And I was also quite excited actually to learn that we seem to have a secret alliance with Hasselblad Foundation. So Carrie is the 7th of Hasselblad awardees to have a show here at Kunstmuseum Basel, the most recent one. Carrie, I thought I could just ask you, take the Hasselblad Award actually as a starting point and just ask you a bit about your relationship to photography, your prime medium.
You know, I had this really awful boyfriend. He was really horrible, but he was also a photographer, and he gave me a camera for my. It was maybe it was my 18th or 20th birthday. I don't really remember. Maybe it must have been my 20th birthday actually. For my 20th birthday, he gave me a Nicomat camera. And I'd been thinking a lot I'd always thought about the arts. Always, since I was a very young girl. Hi, it's good to see you. Ever since I was a very young person. And I started drawing and painting when I was very young. And I started dancing when I was very young as well. But I always knew that there was something about the creative imaginary that was a part of something that was a part of me. That I was already, like a kind of an existentialist by the time I was about 8 years old. I was like very deep, weird kid. And so I had been dancing with Anna Halprin, very interesting modern dance, a legendary figure, who had a wonderful space in San Francisco, the San Francisco Dancers Workshop. And I was just kind of a natural, and so people invited me to be in their groups and their projects, and Anna invited me to join her. But I wasn't really interested in dance. It was something that I did, and I was, performing at the crossroads in the middle of the night with my friends and doing these weird performance actions as a part of, again, my sort of expressive self, but none of them really stuck with me. It wasn't what I saw myself doing in my life. It was something that I was doing. And then my boyfriend gave me this camera. And I shot one roll. And I knew that it was the thing that was going to carry me through the rest of my life. And it did, and it has in really sort of extraordinary ways. I thought that originally that I would be a documentary photographer in the vein of somebody like Robert Frame or Gary Winogrand or Lee Friedlander or Diane Arbus for that matter. but I really wasn't cut out for documentary in that way. I didn't really like photographing people without their permission. There seemed to be something a little aggressive and wrong about that. And so I spent a long time trying to really figure out my way. What was my way? How was I going to use this tool? How was I going to use the camera? I was teaching, working with students, spending a lot of time looking at work. I had started very early gathering materials about women photographers, African American photographers. When I started, there was very, 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 very little information about women photographers or black photographers or other people of color. So I did a lot of research on my own in that regard, looking at everything, talking to all the photographers I could, traveling across country to meet with other photographers, sending out notices, asking people about who were the women photographers, who were the African American photographers, who were the photographers of color, what were they doing, what was the importance of that work, how could I see it? So I spent a lot of time doing that as well as working on my own practice. And I think the seminal moment I really think came for me when I made Kitchen Table Series. The Kitchen Table Series, I think, was a really great and powerful turning point in my life in the way that I would make and build photographs, not just because I was using myself. That wasn't really the most important thing. The most important thing was really figuring out a way to use the camera and to use the construction of imagery in such a way that it could ask a set of new questions and force the viewer and myself to ask another set of questions about what photographs could be. And so that's been my relationship, and it continues to build and to grow and to shift and to change over time. It's been really very exciting. And I was stunned to receive the Hasselblad Award. It was not something that I ever even thought of. It was never even something that I imagined. It had never been given to an African American, and had certainly never been given to an African American woman. So it was just simply not on my radar as something that would necessarily happen to me. But it's been a pleasure and an honor to receive it, and I hope that I'm not the last.
Thank you. Something that was already embedded in when you talked about your practice, how your practice started developing, and something I would like to inquire is how sometimes you work with other people. As the Kitchen Table series you were just mentioning, but also, of course, in our show, Constructing History, it's the case. And I would like to know a bit more about how this came about and what does it mean for you, and how can we imagine such a collaborational process?
Well, I'm really bossy. I really love telling people what to do. Actually, that's not really true. It was a need. It was simply a need. Usually, like everything else, you need more than yourself to get it done. And Kitchen Table required that I step outside of myself and that I invite people into the space with me. Interestingly enough, the Kitchen Table series actually emerged out of another photograph that I made at my kitchen table with a man. And the text reads, really lovely photograph. It doesn't get shown actually very much at all. But the text reads, Jim, if you choose to accept, the mission is to land on your own 2 feet. And I was sort of looking at trying to sort of construct a narrative around Black masculinity, Black male identity, and questions of work. There's a piece upstairs. There's a piece upstairs here that I made also many, many years ago, maybe 45 years ago, from the Ain't Joking series. And the question is, what are the three things you can't give a black person or a black man? And the text reads, a black eye, a fat lip, or a job. Which I thought was really, really important. Because one of the ways in which the black family in the United States has been aggressed, one of the ways in which it's been blocked, one of the ways in which its success has been limited, and one of the ways in which the family itself has been broken was by the manipulation of black men in their relationship to labor. To the extent that you could keep them out of the labor force is to the extent that you could actually destroy and manipulate the family itself, right? So jokes have a profound way of really underscoring a deeper belief system. So going back then to Kitchen Table series, right, Jim, right, the mission is to land on your own 2 feet, right, is reference to something else that's going on more deeply in the society that affects black men in particular. So bringing people into that space, into a space of understanding, into a set of conditions, men and women and children. None of the people in the photographs are my family members. Most of them are people that I met on the streets, and 2 of them were friends. So it was very important to engage a group of people, to talk to them about the process, to talk to them about the ideas, to tell them, to show them what I actually wanted them to do, and to also be there with them, not only as the, quote, narrator or author or photographer, but as the participant observer. That allowed for a certain kind of openness, because once you put yourself on the line with them, right, there's an agreement that we can do this thing together. There's an acceptance that you are as vulnerable and as exposed as the person that's in the frame with you, right? There is no hierarchy. It's simply enacting a set of relationships that needs to be described. And so Kitchen Table emerged in that way, as did really constructing history again, right? Working with my students, asking my students to understand something about the conditions of assassinations that had happened in the United States. Many of them, of course, before they were born, wanting them to understand something about the historical moment and the way in which the United States had evolved into the thing that it is. That a series of assassinations had a great deal to do with what we've become. The assassination of Kennedy, the assassination of John, the assassination of Robert, the assassination of Martin, of Megger, of Malcolm, etc. Right? These are real things. And so again, enacting, bringing in my students into that reality, and not really also wanting to have any more fights around questions of appropriation, also really sort of played into the way in which the work is constructed as well.
Thank you. And by the way, I did have a rhetorical plan, and I missed it, but I did want to highlight that if you Google convenings, Carrie Mae Weems, Solomon R. Guggenheim, for example, you will come to just a breathtaking performance of Carrie Mae Weems, and it is sort of, I think, an introductory moment to the convening that you did for the Guggenheim show at the time, right? And you can really sort of feel the energy of that. How Carrie Mae Weems brings people together and creates an urge. Just wanted to emphasize that as well. And you've talked about it already a little bit, but there are red threads that go through your 4-decade-long work, and images reappear sometimes, or they were here, yeah, very often. So I'd love to hear a bit more about how you work on that level, on the level of maybe call it image selection or creating groups.
I make a lot of work, and I'm really busy. Like I'm a very productive person. I'm always working. I'm never not. It's just really a part of my nature. I'm deeply curious. I'm deeply curious about the world. I like looking at the world around me. I like photographing the world around me, documenting the world around me, trying to describe things. And I don't always know exactly what I'm going to do with the work, but I'm always pulling materials close to me. You know, it's like wearing like your favorite earring. You know what I mean? You know, like you have like that favorite, you know, you have like 50 pairs of earrings, right? But you wear the same ones every day for like months and months and months and months and months, right? Because it's something that it does for you. That it, you know, that it sort of speaks to you in a very profound, very simple, but very profound way. So for instance, in this room, many of these images, I was telling Maya yesterday, most of these images, the vast majority of them, actually made, I don't know, maybe 40 years ago or something. And then I kicked a box one day that was in my way. It was in my studio. It was like this big box. I didn't know what it was. Right? It was sort of heavy, and I opened it, and most of these pieces were in the box. I made them, I showed them once, and then I just put them away. I think I gave a group of them away. I didn't think I was ever going to do anything with them anymore. Some of them I've used repeatedly. The megaphone I use often because I'm always thinking about speaking out. Mahalia I use often because I love the way she looks and I love her mouth being so open in that energy that comes from her. They're just these images that are really important to me. That they just carry meaning and they carry a body of information and material that's important for me to always remember. To always remember. And so I think that I'm really using it as a kind of catalyst for memory. As these repeated ideas, you know, that they are sort of these very important, simple articulations of design and pattern and shape and color and people that carry a certain kind of memory for me. Because I think that ultimately what we're involved in as artists, as writers, as makers, as journalists, as filmmakers, as dancers, or choreographers, for the most part, we're always asking ourselves the same set of questions repeatedly over the course of our lives. And at any given moment, what you're trying to do is to figure out how to answer that question or how to deal with the question now. But the material doesn't change necessarily. Often it's the same material, like a dream that you repeatedly have. It's the same kind of thing. I think that probably it's very interesting because, you know, the work that's in this room, again, some of it is very old, 45 years ago. The newest pieces are painting the town against this wall. They were made only a few years ago. And so I think that I can begin in some ways to kind of see a certain kind of shift in my mode of production. What I'm doing, the way the work looks and how the work functions is absolutely sort of changing. But even with that, I have pitted this work against this work, right? This sort of repeated form of a case study that I'm still working with and that I'll probably be working with for like another few years. You know, we haven't, you know, in every space it's different. It has a different articulation. And yet I still know that I haven't made the perfect one yet. It's not resolved. It's not resolved. And I think that that's it.
Yeah.
That there are certain things in our lives that simply don't get resolved, right? And that our task as creative, imaginary people is to figure out the resolve now to the best of one's ability now, right? Next week it'll be the same, but the expression will be slightly different. How it's made will be slightly different. But the key, the elements, are really very much the same.
And you've just also, apart from having all these shows and awards being given to you, you've completed...
I have all these medals.
Yeah, it's like decorated.
And a fake crown.
You've completed a large, very large installation for the Armory, originally, now also on view in Arles, The Shape of Things.
Yeah.
And I did want to conclude this here in asking, what's next? What are you working on?
Oh, well, what's very exciting, actually. The Shape of Things is an interesting project, and maybe some of you will get a chance to see it. It's in Arles now at the Luma Foundation. So I think it's a seminal piece of work. I think that it's as important as the Kitchen Table series, right? It's just this very specific kind of direction in a very particular way and mode of making that I think is going to be very important. And I hope that I'm right. I could be very, 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 very wrong, but I hope that I'm right. And I've been living with sort of ideas of the circus and clowns for a really long time. Like a really, really, 30 years or 40 years or something. I've been looking at circus and building this thing in the round, right? And being able to talk about the circus of politics. The circus of politics, and then the election of Donald Trump as our primary clown was just sort of like a really important gesture. So I think of it as a really important work. But there's a piece here, it's called Lonnie, Lincoln, and Me, which is a Pepper's Ghost. It's actually a 19th century German form of media. It feels like a hologram. But it isn't. But I like this thing. And I did another one recently, another Pepper's Ghost, based on the life of my grandfather. And so I've been looking at these sort of, these issues. I mean, I'm by no means like a politician. I am deeply embedded in the arts, but I do think about politics a great deal and the ways in which politics and the political impact our lives, the impact of this on our lives, the impact of the social on our lives as women, as people of color, as blacks, etc., right? The impact of this on our lives and the impact of violence on our humanity, the impact of this is really important to me, which is why I'm always sort of pressing. And so I think that there are these sort of key things that are emerging. One of them is restitution, the return of materials, artifacts, bones, and bodies to their communities. This has been building for years. The Hampton Project, of course, is rooted in that. It's partly about that, which is very important. Because the only institution when the Hampton Project was traveling that decided not to take the exhibition was Hampton College. I don't know if you know this or not.
No.
This is actually very, very important. And the reason that they decided, and I don't know if you know this either, Barbara or Elizabeth, the reason that they decided not to take the exhibition, they loved the way it looked, but once they really heard the text, and they heard me calling out the names of the Native Americans that were buried on Hampton's soil, was when they decided that they would not take the exhibition because they didn't want to have to deal with the repatriation of Native American bones to their people. This is like deep, right? So we are building on that now, right? You know, everywhere you look, every time I open up a magazine or a newspaper, the question of, right, will the Rosetta Stone be returned to Egypt? Will these masks be returned to Nigeria? Will these sarcophagi be returned to Greece? Will these, right, that are held in museums primarily in the West, right? Repatriation is huge, as is the question of reparation, and the role of museums in all of it, right? And I think that this is sort of really important. And I've always thought that, the most important thing is to be out in front, to lead the conversation, not to be left lagging, right? Behind, right? When you know this shit is coming, right? But you really haven't thought about it, right? Or you didn't think that it was going to come as quickly, so you didn't have to pay attention to it, right? Museums are having to pay attention to what is happening in the real world in a very deep way. And reparations is part of that. Restitution is a part of that. So I'm working on this project about my grandfather, Frank Weems. And Frank Weems was a union organizer. The piece has been made, and it is a Pepper's Ghost, but it's been made and it's traveling around right now. And out of it, one afternoon, one of the journalists who's interviewing me about the exhibition asked what I had learned. And initially I said, well, learned? And then I thought, well, no. She asked me, how had it changed me? She asked me how it had changed me, which is more important. And initially I said it hadn't changed me at all. And then I stopped really almost mid-sentence. And I said, well, I think that I now know that I could actually pursue reparations for my grandfather. I just sort of heard myself saying reparations for my grandfather because I had been opposed to reparations for a really long time, right? I'd never thought that it would be viable or useful, that it would be a waste of time. But suddenly here I was sort of confronted with the story of my grandfather, who had been worth more dead than alive to the unions of the South. At a certain point, I won't tell you the whole story at the moment. And so I'm working on this project. I've just finished mounting a series of projects around reparations recently over the summer, which was really sort of amazing. Bringing together a group of lawyers to respond actually to my film, the film that I've made about my grandfather, the Pepper's Ghost that I've made about him, and whether or not I might be able to really sort of continue his suit. And so that's been sort of fascinating. So now we're putting together actually a mock trial. I'm developing a mock trial with lawyers and presenters on both sides of the case to argue this issue around the issue of reparation. And I think it's really going to be huge, actually, in the United States, as it is, again, emerging in Africa and in South America as well. And indeed, for any of you who are interested at all in this subject, there's a huge convening of more than 50 African nations just recently, headed by the Soros Foundation, to look at this issue of reparation, right, and restitution of artifacts. Both of them together are emerging. So I think that this is really a really exciting time, and I love being in the midst of this conversation and bringing together people together around it and making work around it as well.
Thank you so much for sharing this, and it's the thing to do right now. It's the discussion, and I'm glad you're at the front line. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and having us show your work in this institution, which needs a bit of pushing still.
Oh, well, Maja, thank you, really. I really have to thank you, and I want to thank you before this amazing audience and before our team some of the members of our team are here who helped install the exhibition, and that's really important. And I also really want to call out my great friend and gallerist, Barbara Toom, who has been so instrumental in making sure that this work actually is traveling in Europe. Thank you, Barbara, so much for all of your work. And of course, Elizabeth Stein has flown all the way from Jack Shaman Gallery to be with us as well. So thank you both very, very much for your work, but primarily to the museum and you for the extraordinary work that you've put into this exhibition. I mean, doing a work like this is so complicated, and it's so difficult and so demanding, and you've been a pleasure to work with. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Carrie. I've been telling the team this was the best install in years. Thank you.